the Israeli government, which has the recently formed Israeli government, is led by the most right-wing people to ever lead a government in the history of Israel, which is,
hundreds
no
of
small
years
feat.
old.
Yes, exactly.
Thousands
yeah,
of
it's
years
actually
old.
thousands.
Excuse
yeah.
me.
This is the most right-wing leadership since Judah Maccabee.
Wow.
I mean, so and the inciting event, as it were, this time around for why people are paying attention to it at least, is because the Netanyahu-led government decided to push through legislation that would effectively make the courts within Israel answer to the legislature.
Yeah.
They would take away the court's right to have, judicial review over legislation.
I think we need to back up here a little bit and go way back in time to Israel's founding in 1948. So one thing Israel doesn't have, along with Britain and like 4 other countries, which I think mostly are other Commonwealth countries.
Yeah, sense of dignity.
Yes, and lacking a constitution.
Correct.
And, I was always told in PE class when I was walking the mile that Jews do lack constitution. I thought they were just talking about me, but in fact they are talking about the very state that I hold citizenship to. So Israel, as far as I understand it, Noah, you know probably much more about this than I do, but when Israel started, they were like, all right, we're going to do a constitution, but later.
Like, we'll get to it.
We'll get to it.
I swear, we're going to get to it.
Not everyone's here yet. We got to get way more guys over here until we can do a constitution.
Yeah.
They're like, we're going to do a constitution. Swear to on God. Well, G-D. But we're not going to do it right now. It is now 2023, and there is still no constitution, right? Because this constitution, to me, again, not a legal scholar here, seems pretty important for the formation of like laws and stuff like that.
Yes. I think in the case of Israel, too, where you have it's ostensibly a parliamentary democracy. And we're talking, of course, only about, within the state of Israel. We're not talking about the millions of people, millions of Palestinians who live in the West Bank and Gaza, which are under de facto Israeli military control and or bombardment.
Yeah.
And in the case of the Constitution in Israel, they decided, we're going to kick the can down the road, but we're going to have a stopgap. And like many grand political compromises intended only to last a short while, it has instead lasted the entirety of the existence of the state, which is that there are 5 basic laws. There's no need to know them individually. The important thing to know, though, is that 5 basic laws a constitution do not make.
Yes.
And so there is, I would say, as it relates to this current crisis, a little bit of, overheated rhetoric about like how there is this is stripping away the last vestiges of democracy within Israel.
Let's put quotes around that. For
Yeah, because it's a little bit, it kind of ignores the premises on which Israel was set up in the first place and has continued to be, particularly since 1967, on the premise on which the state has operated. I think that the significance of this development, if it's not just about like, is democracy dying in Israel, what it is that, on a practical level, the courts within the Israeli political system are essentially the only thing that has kept the Israeli political system from going beyond what other countries, other governments, international bodies would consider the bright red lines. Things like, annexing Palestinian territory outright and making it part of Israel and demanding it to be internationally recognized as such. Certain treatment of Palestinians even more harshly than they already are in terms of, bringing back the death penalty. There's a wide variety of, things that come on the table that otherwise would not be if the courts are, essentially castrated. And that is, on a practical level, not a great outcome.
No.
But if we're really talking about like what is happening, what is changing in the character of the Israeli state, I would argue that this coalition is in effect, bringing out it's like sucking out the cum of Israel. It's getting its true essence most purely. You've got like a government that is actually really attempting to lead Israel toward a truer purpose of what the government is set up to do than what the government has been in before, which is, has had, truthfully, been stopped from pursuing some of the most aggressive, and genocidal policies against Palestinians.
Well, I think that's an important point because in the kind of classic, let's say, pro-democracy argument, when you start to see the kind of classic authoritarian slide or whatever, like these kind of like political science types like to talk about, what they're usually referring to is when like courts are emboldened or strengthened, right? In the classic, like Poland, for example, that happened, or in other countries, in Brazil, right, where you're seeing kind of like sweeping use of the courts to kind of usurp sort of
hell in America,
this is a sort of different formulation because the politics in Israel are quite different.
And also, I would say that in the case of the courts, it's because the courts are secular. Like they're a secular, like they are like just like they have some intellectual and philosophical foundation in Jewish precepts, but like they're not religious courts. The judges are not rabbis.
Yeah.
But
the people who lead this government, many of them, if not most, want those people ultimately down the line to be rabbis.
Well, and like the elected leadership in parliament is quite right wing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So as Israel's political system overall, right? It's a unicameral parliament.
Correct.
Meaning they just have one fucking house. And the party that has the most seats and can gather a coalition gets to form the executive branch.
Correct.
Right?
And you have to form a coalition, it's 60 plus 1 because there's 120 seats. And traditionally, but not always, the party that comes in first will get the ability to form a coalition. However, the way it works, and this is, again, like it's all of this stuff is basically, you're describing like, well, it's supposed to do that. There's no constitution. There's not like a lot of formal practices or formal instructions that outline this. The president, who is the formal head of state, but who really does not have powers beyond this specific function, he then invites somebody to form a government, and he'll invite for whomever there is the most obvious path to form a majority coalition.
Gotcha.
Now, 60 plus 1 is a very, like in Weimar Germany, for example, a notoriously stable government, you could form minority governments. Like they had governments, led by the Social Democrats, for example, that, were able to rule and continue to hold power even though they didn't make up a majority of the legislature. In Israel, 60 plus 1, if it's under that, the government falls, you got issues. Government falls, you got to form a new government. That's why Israel recently has gone to elections so many times. And so if you already start from, you got 120, if you are the right wing and, there are, or you're, let's say, you're not going to form a coalition with Arabs. And if you're the center and the left, or if you're some parties are not going to be in coalition with others because they want different things. And so you end up in the process of catering to smaller blocs that are just either not going to participate like Arab Israeli parties.
This is always the problem.
It's always the problem. I think the issue, now is they've got it, especially as it relates to this legislation, is that they are, this to me is, I brought up Weimar for a reason because I do think that this is, this is part of the process of how you see an actual authoritarian slide, if not quite a one-party state, but truly this unworkable parliamentary system, widening inequality, an enormous amount of ethnic, anxiety, to put it mildly, that's just clearly going to become genocidal ferment.
Yeah.
It's very, to me, it's this law is very reminiscent of the emergency legislation to me that was passed in the years before, Hitler ever became chancellor.